Senator, we want to switch gears now and talk about this letter that you sent to Gina Haspel. As you know, the Senate Intel Committee confirmed her this morning as the director of the CIA. In your letter, you asked for clarification as to whether the CIA conducted surveillance on then candidate Trump and all other presidential candidates for that matter. Can you talk about the reports that led you to draft this particular letter?
There's been stories over the last month or two in the press saying that the head of British intelligence flew to Washington and met with John Brennan. You remember him? He was the head of the CIA, but he also turns out to be a partisan that hates the president. So he's been very, very vocal in his hatred of President Trump, and he's meeting with the head of the British intelligence, and they're talking about information they got by eavesdropping or wiretapping the phones of Trump officials. Now, they'll say, oh, it was accidental and it's incidental, so it's no big deal. I think there is still a question, and they should be asked under oath. John Brennan should be asked, Gina Haspel should be asked, and frankly, other members of President Obama's administration should be asked, did you ask the British intelligence to spy on the Trump campaign? This is a really important question. This is something you could go to jail for if you were involved with trying to do something that's against the law. It's against the law for the CIA to spy on American citizens that are not associated with anything with espionage. The CIA is supposed to work outside the country. The FBI works within the country. But if the CIA, through John Brennan, someone known now to be a Trump hater, if they were involved with using the British intelligence to spy on Trump, this is enormous, and somebody ought to go to jail for it.
Senator, one of your major concerns, in your own words, is that people running our intelligence agencies are partisan, have an axe to grind. Do you feel that Americans should be concerned that Gina Haspel is, in fact, one of those people?
My concern is that Gina Haspel is a close protege of John Brennan. And when John Brennan gives you a full-throated endorsement, that worries me. Because, see, John Brennan and James Clapper, for that matter, once they left government, if you read their comments or seen them on television, James Clapper's out there now as a global warming critic, and he's in favor of every left-wing cause out there. John Brennan's out there saying, I think, defamatory and ugly comments about the president. So, yeah, I worry that they had so much power, and it turns out they're very partisan. So I think partisanship can happen on both sides. So what I've been arguing for is that everybody in the intelligence community, regardless of their political association, should have to ask a judge for a warrant to look at Americans' information. If they want to go to these big, massive computer databases and look up Donald Trump or look up a Donald Trump supporter or look up a Republican or a conservative, they should have to ask a judge, because a judge would shut that down and say you're not supposed to do political things with this intelligence information. So yes, we need more controls. We need more watchers on the watchers.
Senator, we're running out of time here, but real quickly, I just want to ask you before we move on and talk about North Korea, are you planning to vote in favor of Gina Haspel?
No, I can't, because I think torture, waterboarding doesn't represent who we are. There's also something even worse than the torture that we did. We actually farmed out the torture. So under Gina Haspel and John Brennan, they were sending people through extraordinary rendition to Syria to have Assad torture them. So imagine the irony now. We're now bombing Assad because we think he's a barbarian. He used gas on his people, probably did. And yet we were using him to torture people because we knew he was a barbarian 10 years ago and that he would use all kinds of torture that wasn't acceptable. So it's a weird kind of thing where the U.S., and we are a great country, would capture people, fly them around the world blindfolded and drop them off in a dungeon in Assad's Syria or Mubarak's Egypt. Many of them never showed up. But I do know of one Canadian engineer who was kidnapped, taken to Syria, and the Syrians finally, after torturing him, said he, and investigating who he was, said you got the wrong guy. It was sort of a mistaken identity, and it's like there's a lot of people in the world with the same name. This actually happened 26 times out of 125 times. 125 people were sent for torture. 26 of them were the wrong people. That's not who we are, and we shouldn't reward somebody who was a big part of that, an enthusiastic supporter. We shouldn't reward her with being head of the CIA.
Senator, real quickly, North Korea, as you know, you have been quoted actually as saying we shouldn't overreact, Americans shouldn't overreact to this latest move by North Korea. But do you think ultimately Kim is trying to get something from the U.S., and do you think the summit will actually happen?
I'm hopeful that the summit will happen. I think it will happen. It's a prediction, so it could be wrong. I do think that, yes, North Korea has a history of jockeying back and forth North Korea has a history of being opposed to our military exercises we do with South Korea. So I think it's a way of them blowing off steam, and I think there still will be the summit in Singapore. I think that from North Korea's perspective, they need to look at the amazing trade they could have with the rest of the world. Instead of being isolated, South Korea is such an incredibly rich country, and it's become rich over the last 40 or 50 years through international trade. That would spread into North Korea if they would allow their country to be more open and not be so bellicose with their nuclear weapons. Nobody knows what happens, but I have been very encouraged that President Trump actually is probably braver and bolder than almost any president, that he's willing to directly go to have meetings. It's not a guarantee that it works, but dialogue, I think, for the most part, is good.
Newsmax TV. Watch us on Dish, DirecTV, AT&T Uverse, Verizon Fios, or download our free app. Don't have Newsmax TV? Call your local cable provider and request Newsmax today.